Before I get into the bulk of this video, I must first ask you all a question. If your life was on the line, how do you think you would react? If running was out of the question, what would you do? Would you roll over and cower? Would you plead for your life? Or would you fight? And if you were to fight, just how far would you go? Would you use just enough force to disengage? But what if that doesn't work? How far do you think you'd be willing to go? Would you kill a person? Now, since we are all unique, we will have slightly different answers, but for the most part, one key factor unites us all. If push came to shove, human beings will fight. And it's almost never pretty. In saying that, a lot of different examples are probably going through your head. A very straightforward one that I can give that applies this logic is soldiers and people in wars. There are countless stories, documentaries, and first-hand accounts of people who, when pushed to their limits, become someone else entirely. When their life was in danger, when their future was challenged, they became ravenous. And this, my friends, brings us to a major point of this video. The indomitable human spirit isn't always pretty. It can be genuinely terrifying. Unless there's an alien who's currently listening to this, chances are you know what the indomitable human spirit is. It's frequently referenced in shows and movies, it's a favorite amongst comic books and children's stories, and heck, there's a good chance that you yourself have experienced your own indomitable human spirit at some point in your life. Whether it was something as simple as pushing through to get some work done, or something as harsh as fighting for your life. Nearly everyone has experienced this at least once or twice. The human spirit is usually defined as something that makes an individual brave, hardworking, and persistent. But it's more than that. The indomitable human spirit is something that's nearly impossible to put to words. It's that hand on your back, constantly pushing you forward. That electric current that runs through you, giving you the little edge you needed. It's a feeling in your chest. It's the air in your lungs. It's what gives all of us life. Which is why it's referenced so much in media, with characters that are heroic and never give up, who always make the right call and know what to say. Embodying the indomitable human spirit means to be a near-perfect being who scoffs in the face of danger and always does the right thing. Well, at least that's what most stories will tell you. But you see, real people aren't perfect. We're not Rey from Star Wars. We're not artificial robots who are designed without flaw. We're complex. Every single one of us is distinct, with our own set of morals, thoughts, emotions, and qualities, both the good and the bad. Which brings us to my problem with a lot of characters who are meant to embody the human spirit. They're just not realistic. They almost always just end up perfect, and that just never sat right with me. These characters would only ever show one side of a story. They would only show the good parts of humanity while completely disregarding the notion that the human spirit can be genuinely terrifying. And this idea of the other side of humanity being completely disregarded is exactly why Guts is the greatest example of the indomitable human spirit. Because his moments of triumph are sometimes horribly terrifying. Guts is a very complicated character. In fact, this level of complexity is what makes him such a great character. He's riddled with a whirlwind of different emotions, issues, traumas, and triumphs. From PTSD due to childhood abuse, to anxiety, depression, and constantly being involved in high amounts of violence, Guts kind of has it all. And interesting enough, aside from the constantly fighting demons thing, all of Guts' issues are terrifyingly real. Not even realistic. They're just real. Real issues that millions of people have to deal with. The PTSD, sexual violence, depression, thoughts of worthlessness, and general crippling doubt are all very real concepts. Parts of Guts are real. In a way, Guts himself is nearly a real person. And this isn't by accident. Miura has gone on record multiple times saying that Guts is supposed to be a hyper-realistic example of what a man can be if the world itself was pushed to its absolute worst. Don't get me wrong, he's still obviously a main character and powerhouse trope, but in terms of his actual character, he's grounded in reality. And this concept of being truly grounded is what gives Guts the ability to truly show all sides of the indomitable human spirit. All of the good and all of the bad. To start, I'd like to go over the good and powerfully inspiring side of Guts' human spirit. The first major example of this is that he never gave up as a child, and against all odds, he continued to live on. As a child, Guts was forced into war at a young age due to an abusive father and toxic upbringing. Every day was a challenge. However, even though he was nearly killed multiple times throughout his young years and forced to live a life of a mercenary, his spirit carried him forwards. Whether it was through his training with Gambino, his trauma with Donovan, or nearly getting eaten by a pack of wolves, Guts' body would just seemingly move on its own, and he would continue to struggle forwards and live on. Another major example of Guts' indomitable human spirit being genuinely good comes from his legendary 100-man fight. This fight was the first time in the manga since Gambino that we saw Guts truly fighting for someone or something other than himself. While tired, wounded, and suffering from borderline hyperthermia, Guts single-handedly fought off 100 men for the sole purpose of protecting someone that he cared for. And in a phenomenally well-drawn, inspiring moment of true, unwavering human spirit, he successfully managed to overcome the overwhelming force and protect the one that he cared for. And finally, a less talked about aspect of Guts' humanity and spirit is the fact that he's constantly holding back the Beast of Darkness, which is a literal manifestation of all of the pain, suffering, and hate that has been swelling up inside of him for years. This man has been beat down. He's been through more physical and mental trauma than anyone else. He's been assaulted, brutalized, and pushed to near death on multiple occasions. Yet even after all of that, through nothing more than straight willpower and the love for others, he came out of the other side. He came out a better man, a man who prioritizes life and his loved ones. And that, my friends, is about as honorable as a deed as can be done. However, Guts is not all sunshine and rainbows. There are other moments where his human spirit can be a bit nasty. During the eclipse, Guts is pushed to his absolute limit. He becomes both physically and mentally exhausted, while being pushed forward by nothing but sheer willpower. And at the height of his suffering, while Griffith is assaulting Casca, something occurs. Something snaps in Guts. While being forced to watch as Griffith violently defiles Casca, Guts, in a moment of pure rage, decides to hack off his own arm with a broken sword in order to get just a single chance to get to Griffith. And we get this panel. This panel is terrifying. This look on Guts' face goes beyond words. There aren't enough in the dictionary to describe the immense amount of wrath that is radiating off of the page. His white eyes showing no sign of the Guts we know. His mutilated arm soaking his body with blood. And worst of all, his scream. He releases this animalistic roar that sends chills down my spine. This is the side of man that we don't enjoy speaking about. This barbaric, violent, and dangerous side of the human spirit that is often neglected due to just how downright terrifying it is. Now keep in mind, this isn't me saying Guts is in the wrong here. He is more than justified. My point is that this right here is in all of us. This is the side of mankind that isn't often shown. And it's a perfect example of just how terrifying the indomitable human spirit can be. And it gets worse. You see, at least in this situation, Guts is justified in his rage. So instead, let's look at a time when his rage was unjustified. For this part of the video, I want to take us to the opening arc of Conviction. Lost Children. And by the way, there are some lunatics in the fandom who think this arc is filler, and you're dumb. Lost Children is primarily focused with showing you just how far Guts has fallen. It's meant to show you just how toxic and terrifying his indomitable rage is. In this arc, we see Guts use a child as a hostage, brutally and unapologetically murder monsters who he knows are actually kids, nearly get an innocent girl killed on multiple accounts, and nearly just straight up murder the same innocent girl, all in order to enact his revenge. Guts is a fucking monster in this arc. He's like a natural disaster who's just rolling through this forest, leaving carnage wherever he goes. This is the most tired, angry, feral, and animalistic version of Guts that we have ever seen. Symbolized not so subtly through Miura's masterful art, often depicting Guts like some sort of scratchy shadow monster. To say Guts is unhinged here would be an understatement. Another amazing detail Miura added here was making the main antagonist a cute little girl. A young girl who was wronged by society and manipulated by the God Hand. In a lot of ways, Rosine is innocent. Or at least she's not completely evil. Sure, she's done a lot of terrible things, and I'm not trying to discredit any of her misdeeds, but compared to a lot of other people in Berserk, and especially since she's like 13, she's definitely got some leeway. But this doesn't matter to Guts. All he sees is another enemy, another head to add to his increasing body count. Another great detail is that for large parts of this arc, we don't even see Guts. We just see his destruction. In this arc, he's the boogeyman. He's this massive, hulking monster covered in black who just won't stop hunting. And the panels you get in this arc perfectly showcase just how terrifying Guts has become. With the main character of this arc, Jill, stating that during this fight, Guts was the one who looked like the terrifying monster to her. Whether it's jumping through fire, cutting open a sack that has a literal child in it, biting through a massive stinger, or literally cleaving a girl in half, there is nothing this man won't do to satisfy this bloodlust. And you know what's really interesting about this fight, and the entire point of my video really? This is one of the strongest moments of Guts' indomitable human spirit. At multiple moments in this fight, he's exhausted, on death's door, and yet he keeps fighting. He won't give up. His human spirit just absolutely refuses to give an inch. And just because it's not pretty and uplifting doesn't mean it's not there. This is real. Circling back to the start of the video, I asked you all how far you'd be willing to go if your life was on the line. And while obviously it wouldn't be to this unnatural extent, there's a very solid chance that a good majority of you could take it here. It's shown throughout times of war, times of hardships, and often in these horror stories that we see on the news. People aren't perfect, and the reality is, when pushed to the absolute limit, willpower isn't always pretty. Guts' flaws are what give him the ability to break past the traditional hero into a realm of his own. The way he reacts to situations, both good and bad, mirror the way different individuals in our real world would react to similar situations. Guts is the physical embodiment of the indomitable human spirit, because he shows all sides of the coin. Because these moments of triumph can be both terrifying and inspiring. Because when push comes to shove, he's not always kind, but he's also not always cruel. To be human is to be imperfect. To be human is to be complicated. And Guts is the single greatest example of the indomitable human spirit, because at his core, he's simply a human being.